September 15th, 2025, 10 a.m., Washington, D.C. The hearing room of the House Ethics Committee crackled with an electric tension that could have powered the city grid. It wasn't just the hum of anticipation or the glare of polished nameplates catching the overhead lights like mirrors. It was the weight of something unspoken, something waiting to detonate. Rows of American flags stood rigid along the walls, their stars gleaming like sentinels in a battlefield staged for television. Cameras from CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC blinked red from every corner, their lenses trained like snipers on the long mahogany table where lawmakers sat, their postures a mix of practiced poise and barely concealed nerves. The air wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Outside, the Capitol's marble steps swarmed with reporters, their boom mics tilting like lances, ready to capture the moment history tipped. Inside, Jim Jordan, the Ohio congressman with a reputation sharper than a switchblade, leaned back in his chair, his crooked tie a deliberate nod to his brand of casual defiance. His smirk was camera-ready, a practiced curve that said he owned this room, this moment, this fight. But across the table, Jasmine Crockett, the young Texas congresswoman, moved with a different kind of power quiet, precise, like a shadow slipping through a storm. In her navy suit, tailored to fit like armor, she carried no jewelry, no flourish. Just a worn black folder tucked under her arm and a small silver ring in her pocket. A keepsake from her mother that she never wore but always carried. It was her anchor, a reminder of South Dallas streets and a promise made long ago. Today, that promise was about to ignite. Jasmine didn't glance at Jordan as she crossed the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a rhythm that felt less like a march and more like a countdown. The CNN producer, a shard beady, a shard beady, a shard beady, and leaves a rise, long last, in cokered sins. Her long last. Woman named Maya Torres leaned forward in the press gallery, her notepad already half filled with scribbles. Maya had received an anonymous text at 4 a.m. Watch Crockett today. She's bringing fire. And now, watching Jasmine's deliberate stride, she nudged her cameraman. Get her face, tight shot, don't miss a thing. Jordan, oblivious to the shift, muttered something to his aide, a lanky young man with a frat boy grin who chuckled on cue. To Jordan, this was just another day in the arena, another chance to dominate, to spin, to win. He'd built a career on out-talking opponents, on turning hearings into theater where he played the untouchable lead. But Jasmine wasn't here for his script. She took her seat at the far end of the table, opened her folder with the care of someone handling a live grenade, and placed it flat on the desk. The room didn't notice the gesture, but Jordan's eyes flicked to her hands. For a split second, his smirk twitched a crack in the mask. So small, it might have been a trick of the light. The chairman's gavel struck once, a sharp crack that silenced the murmurs. This hearing is now in session, he declared, his voice flat but heavy, like the first note of a requiem. The room stilled, the air growing denser, as if gravity itself had doubled. Jasmine didn't look up. She tapped her folder once, twice, then paused a signal so subtle it went unnoticed by all but her aide, a wiry young woman named Lena standing near the back curtain. Lena's fingers moved swiftly over her phone, sending a coded message to a tech in the control van outside. A media screen in the corner flickered, just for a moment, like the spark of a match in a gas-filled room. In the CNN truck, a red light blinked on, USB trigger armed, remote playback ready. Jasmine hadn't spoken yet, but the stage was set. The fuse lit. Jordan adjusted his tie, leaning back with the ease of a man who thought he'd already won. He didn't see the shift, didn't feel the ground tilting beneath him. To him, Jasmine was just another target, another voice to drown out with a quip or a sneer. He whispered to his aide again, something about another grandstander. And the aide snickered, loud enough to draw a glance from a nearby reporter. Jasmine began, her voice low and steady, cutting through the room like a blade through silk. This hearing isn't about theories or headlines. It's about accountability. It's about power being sold, votes being shaped in backrooms, and campaign dollars flowing from the very corporations this committee is tasked to oversee. The words landed softly, but carried weight, each syllable measured, deliberate. She didn't look at Jordan, didn't need to. The room shifted, chairs creaked, eyes narrowed, and a Republican congressman coughed into his fist, trying to mask his unease. Jordan, unfazed, let out a sharp laugh, loud enough for his mic to catch. "Here we go," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Conspiracy hour. Let me guess, dark money, secret donors, and it all points to me, right?" He leaned forward, his grin wide, daring her to take the bait. The gallery stirred, a few reporters scribbling furiously, sensing blood in the water. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She met his gaze for the first time, her eyes steady, unreadable. "Congressman," she said, her tone calm but piercing, "I haven't named anyone. If you feel implicated, that's your own shadow talking." A ripple of laughter broke from the press gallery, quickly stifled. Jordan's smirk froze, his fingers tightening around his pen. Behind the curtain, Lena tapped her phone again, her message short. Screen lock disabled. Playback cued. The tech in the CNN van leaned closer to his monitor, whispering, "This is live, right?" His supervisor nodded, her eyes glued to the feed. Jasmine continued, her voice unwavering as she laid out a timeline from her folder donations. Received votes cast, names redacted, but patterns clear. Legislation stalled when money moved. Regulations vanished when checks cleared. Each point was a brick in a wall she was building, not with anger, but with precision. Jordan interrupted again, his voice louder this time, edged with irritation. "This isn't a courtroom, Congresswoman. You don't get points for slideshows." His side of the aisle chuckled, a rehearsed sound that felt more like armor than amusement. But Jasmine didn't pause. She tapped her folder again, 3 sharp taps, a code Lena recognized instantly. In the control van, the text screen flashed, playback armed. A second media screen at the press table blinked awake, unnoticed by most, but not by Maya, who scribbled a single word in her notepad. Evidence. Jasmine's gaze shifted to Jordan. Not with fury, but with something colder, sharper, like a surgeon sizing up a cut. "You keep interrupting," she said, her voice low, as if your voice matters more. "But I'm not here to shout. I'm here to show." The room went still, the air tightening like a noose. Jordan's aide stopped typing, his frat boy grin gone. Maya leaned forward, her pen hovering, sensing the shift. Jasmine reached beneath her desk, her movement slow, deliberate, and pulled out a small black USB drive. Unmarked, unassuming, but heavy with intent. She set it on the table with a soft click that echoed like a hammer on steel. The room didn't breathe. Jordan's eyes locked on the drive, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of something new, uncertainty. "What's that?" he asked. His tone caught between mockery and caution. "Another prop for your drama." Jasmine didn't answer. She slid the USB into her laptop, and the screen behind her pulsed once. Then went black, not blank, but black like the moment before. Storm breaks, the silence stretched, taut and electric. In the press gallery, Maya whispered to her cameraman, "Zoom in, now." The CNN feed tightened on Jasmine's face, calm, unflinching, her eyes like steel under the lights. Behind her, the screen flickered again, and a low hum filled the room, followed by the unmistakable clink of silverware on glass. The murmur of a private dinner, the kind of setting where secrets are traded over wine. Then a voice cut through, clear, unmistakable. "Jim Jordan's, they're easy to take down," he said, his tone casual, almost bored. "Black women in law, they're the easiest to discredit. Push their buttons, get them loud, let the press turn them into a caricature." The words landed like a bomb, splintering the room into fragments of shock and silence. Gasps broke from the gallery. A Democratic aide froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. A Republican congressman shifted in his seat, his face paling as if he'd just seen his career flash before his eyes. Jordan's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. His aide, the one with the frat boy grin, stared at the floor, his phone slipping from his hand. The tape kept rolling. Another voice, male, unnamed, laughed. "It's not hard. The media loves a tantrum. Give them rage, and she's done." The laughter that followed wasn't nervous, it was cruel, confident, the sound of men who thought no one was listening. But someone had been. Jasmine let the audio play, her face unchanged, her hands folded calmly on the desk. She didn't need to speak. The recording was her voice now, echoing through the chamber like a ghost dragging chains. The screen went silent, the audio fading into a hush that felt louder than any shout. Jordan's face had lost its color, his knuckles white against the desk. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes darting to his aide, who offered no rescue. In the CNN van, Maya's supervisor muttered, "Clip it. That's the moment." The lower third on the live feed shifted. Breaking audio exposes Jordan in ethics hearing. Twitter was already ablaze. Hashtags forming like storm clouds. Hashtag Jordan tapes. Hashtag Crockett exposes. The hearing room of the House Ethics Committee, September 15, 2025, was no longer a chamber of debate, was a crucible, molten and unyielding, where truths were forged or burned away. The screen behind Jasmine Crockett glowed with a single slide, its title searing the air like a brand. Strategic Communications Plan, containing higher-risk minority lawmakers. The words were clinical, corporate, but their intent was raw, predatory. A blueprint for sabotage laid bare under the capitals. Unforgiving lights. Jasmine stood at the center of the storm. Her navy suit a stark contrast to the chaos she'd unleashed. Her expression as steady as a surgeon mid-incision. Jim Jordan, once the untouchable titan of congressional combat, sat rigid. His knuckles white around a pen he hadn't written with in minutes. Sweat beaded at his temple, a traitor to his defiant posture. The camera CNN, Fox News, MSNBC's zoomed in, their red lights blinking like the eyes of a predator circling its prey. Outside, the crowd's chants grew louder, a distant thunder, rolling through the marble walls, but inside, the silence was louder. A vacuum that swallowed every whisper, every cough, every hope of retreat. Jasmine's hand hovered over her laptop, her fingers brushing the second USB silver. Smaller than the first, but heavy with the weight of what was to come. The room didn't just watch her. It leaned toward her, as if gravity itself had shifted. To her side, Jasmine's voice cut through the stillness. Not loud, but precise, like a blade finding its mark. "This isn't about one dinner, one tape, one moment," she said. Her eyes sweeping the chamber, locking briefly on Jordan before moving to the cameras, to the nation beyond. "This is about a machinist system designed to silence, to shape, to control. And it's been running for years, right under our noses." She pressed a key, and the screen shifted, revealing a new slide, a screenshot of an email. Time-stamped 2 years prior, its subject line bold and damning. Neutralizing? Crockett, Media Strategy. The text was cold, calculated, a playbook for destruction. Zoom in on emotional outbursts. It read, "Frame her as unstable. Avoid engaging her data redirect to race or gender cues." Gasps rippled through the press gallery. Maya Torres. The CNN reporter scribbled furiously, her pen nearly tearing the page. She'd seen dirty politics before, but this was surgical. A dissection of a person's voice before they even spoke. Jordan's aide, the lanky one with the frat boy grin now gone, sank lower in his seat, his phone dark, his loyalty unraveling. Jasmine didn't pause. She clicked again, and another email appeared. If she brings evidence, laugh it off. Call it a conspiracy. Let her walk into the trap. The words hung on the screen like a confession carved in stone. The room exhaled, a collective release of breath that carried shock, anger, and something deeper recognition. This wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett. It was about every voice that had been framed, every story twisted, every truth buried under a carefully crafted lie. Jasmine stepped closer to the mic, her voice steady but laced with a quiet fire. "This isn't politics," she said. "This is character assassination, planned and paid for, written in emails, approved in meetings, executed on national TV. And it wasn't just me. It was anyone who dared to speak, anyone who didn't fit their frame." She clicked again, and a new slide appeared, a full deck, polished and professional, titled Objective, Control the Narrative. Bullet points listed strategies that read like a military campaign. Manipulate camera angles to emphasize aggression. Cut her mic if she raises her voice. Plant questions with sympathetic journalists to derail her message. Each line was a brick in a wall built to cage her, to cage anyone like her. The gallery stirred, reporters typing faster, their phones buzzing with notifications as the internet caught fire. Hashtag Crockett Exposes was trending at 3 million mentions and climbing. It's the clip of Jordan's dinner tape already looping on every platform. Jordan shifted in his chair, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. He leaned forward, his voice hoarse, desperate to claw back control. "This is a setup," he said, his words tumbling out too fast. "Every campaign has strategies, talking points, and media plans. You're acting like this is a scandal when it's just politics. Everyone does it." His voice rose, cracking on the last syllable, and he pointed at Jasmine, his finger trembling. "You're turning a hearing into a circus." But the room didn't rally to him. His colleagues, once quick to nod or chuckle, sat silent. There, eyes fixed on the table, the floor, anywhere but him. Even Lauren Boebert, usually eager to leap into the fray, stayed seated, her lips tight, her hands folded like she was bracing for impact. The chairman's gavel hovered, but didn't fall. He looked at Jordan, then at Jasmine, and said simply, "The Congresswoman will proceed." It wasn't permission, it was a verdict. Jasmine nodded once, her movements deliberate, and clicked. To the next slide, a new email, this one with a digital signature that made the room gasp again. Jim Jordan. Approved the 12th of March, 2023. The message was brief but devastating. Push her into the angry black woman box. It's the easiest sell to our base. The words burned into the screen, into the room, into the millions watching live. Maya Torres dropped her pen, her breath catching as she whispered to her cameraman, "That's it. That's the kill shot." In the CNN control van, the producer shouted, "Keep it on her face. Tight shot. Don't cut away." The feed zoomed in, capturing Jasmine's calm, unyielding gaze, her hands steady as she let the evidence speak. Jordan's aide, the one who'd been typing earlier, stood abruptly and slipped out the back door, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice low and panicked as he muttered, "Get me a lawyer, now." The move didn't go unnoticed. A reporter from NPR followed, her recorder already running. Sensing a fracture in Jordan's camp, Jasmine's voice returned. Not louder, but sharper, cutting through the murmurs like a wire through clay. "This wasn't an accident," she said. "This was a plan, signed off on, executed over months, designed to make sure I was seen but never heard, And it wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who looks like me, every voice they thought they could frame and forget. She clicked again, and the screen shifted to a list of names, not just hers, but other lawmakers, activists, even journalists. All women of color, all targeted with similar strategies. The slide was titled High-Risk Targets, and each name was paired with a tactic: provoke emotional response, dismiss as unqualified, amplify negative social media. The room went silent again, not out of shock, but out of shame. A collective realization that this wasn't one man's mistake, it was a system at work. Ayanna Pressley, seated 2 chairs down, leaned forward, her eyes locked on the screen, her hand tightening around her pen. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her presence was a wall, a silent vow of solidarity. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood. Slowly, her heels tapping the marble floor like a metronome, and took her place beside Jasmine, not for show, but for strength. The sight of the 2 women, unyielding, unshaken, sent a ripple through the chamber, a fault line cracking open. Outside, the crowd was no longer a murmur, but a roar. Protesters, students, and everyday citizens from D.C. to Dallas gathered in. Front of screens, their phones raised, live streaming the moment to millions. A group of law students from Howard University, led by a young woman named Keisha, stood at the Capitol steps, their signs reading truth over tactics and Jasmine speaks for us. Keisha, who'd been inspired by Jasmine's campaign years ago, typed furiously on her phone, her live stream hitting 50,000 viewers in minutes. "This isn't just a hearing," she said into her camera, her voice trembling with conviction. "This is our history being rewritten right now." Back inside, Jasmine clicked to another slide. This one, a timeline of actions tied to the emails, media hits orchestrated to discredit her, talking points fed to pundits, even hashtags engineered to trend. One slide showed a tweet from a prominent conservative account, posted 6 months prior. "Crockett's just another loudmouth with no substance. Hashtag angry unhinged." The tweet had 20,000 retweets, but the slide revealed its origin on email from Jordan's team, suggesting the exact wording. The room's temperature seemed to drop, the air growing heavy with the weight of exposure. Jordan tried to speak again, his voice thinner now, almost pleading. "You can't just throw up emails and call it proof," he said. "Where's the chain of custody? Where's the context? This is a witch hunt." But his words fell flat, drowned by the evidence on the screen. A Republican congressman from Iowa, a moderate who'd been silent until now, leaned toward his aide and whispered, "Get me everything we have on his donors, now. I'm not going down with him." The aide nodded, her hand shaking as she typed. Across the aisle, a young Democratic staffer, barely 25, wiped a tear from her cheek. Not out of sadness, but awe. She'd seen Jasmine speak at a rally 2 years ago, a speech about justice that had made her want to work in D.C. now, watching her dismantle a giant. She felt something shift inside her, a spark of courage she hadn't known she carried. Jasmine stepped back from the mic, letting the slide speak for itself. The screen now showed a final directive, chilling in its simplicity. If exposed, deny document exists. Blame third-party contractors. Make her look paranoid. Jordan flinched, a visible twitch that the cameras caught in high definition. His face, once smug, was now a mask of panic, his eyes darting to the exits as if calculating a run. But there was no running from this. Maya Torres and the press gallery sent a text to her editor. "This is bigger than Watergate. Get me airtime tonight." Her cameraman adjusted his lens, capturing the moment Jasmine turned back to her folder, pulling out a single photograph, not evidence, but personal. It was her Uncle Vernon, standing outside a VA hospital, his face proud despite the oxygen tank at his side. She didn't show it to the room, didn't need to. It was for her a reminder of why she'd spent nights poring over donor lists, vote records, and emails, tracing the threads of corruption that had cost Vernon his life. He'd served in Vietnam, come home with medals and scars, only to be denied care by a system gutted by private contractors tied to Jordan's donors. That was the fire in her veins, the reason she'd walked into this room with a USB and a plan. She slid the photo back into her folder, her hands steady, her resolve. Ironclad. The chairman's voice broke the silence, measured but firm. "The Congresswoman has the floor," he said, his tone a warning to anyone thinking of interrupting. Boebert shifted in her seat, her face flushed, but she didn't stand again. Jordan's aide, the one who'd slipped out, returned his expression. Grim, his phone now clutched like a lifeline. Whispers spread among the Republican bench, not of support, but of survival. "Distance yourself," one congressman muttered to another. "This is a sinking ship." The words were barely audible, but they carried a crack in the party's armor. Jasmine clicked to another slide, this one a chart mapping donations to votes. Each line a thread in a web that stretched from Jordan's campaign to corporate boardrooms. "March 12, 2023, she said, her pointer tapping the screen. $75,000. From Horizon Pharma. March 14th, a vote to block a bill capping prescription drug prices. That bill would have saved 12,000 lives last year. She paused, letting the number sink in. 12,000 people, including my uncle, who died waiting for care that never came. The room didn't gasp. This time, Mitt froze. Even the reporters stopped, typing, their hands hovering over keyboards, their eyes locked on Jasmine. She wasn't just presenting evidence. She was telling a story, one that connected the dots between money, power, and loss. The screen shifted again, showing a leaked memo from a lobbying firm tied to Horizon Pharma, outlining key allies in Congress. Jordan's name was circled in red. The memo wasn't speculation, was a contract, a deal sealed in ink, and influence. Jasmine's voice softened, not out of weakness, but strategy. "This isn't about one man," she said. "It's about a system that lets men like him sell their votes while people like my uncle pay the price." The words weren't loud, but they were seismic, shaking the room, the cameras, the country watching at home. Outside, the crowd had swelled, spilling onto the Capitol lawn, their signs no longer just about Jasmine, but about justice, about accountability. Keisha, the Howard student, was now joined by dozens of others, their live streams merging into a digital wave that crashed across social media. #TruthOverTactics was trending globally, with 5 million mentions and counting. A retired judge from Atlanta stitched a video of Jasmine's speech with her own story of being dismissed as too emotional in courtrooms decades ago. "This isn't new," she said, her voice steady. "But today, it's loud." Inside, Jasmine stepped back from the screen, letting the memo linger, its words a noose tightening around Jordan's career. He didn't speak, didn't move. His eyes fixed on the floor as if staring hard enough could make it swallow him whole. His aide, back in his seat, typed a single word into his phone: resign. Jasmine's gaze shifted to the cameras, to the millions beyond the room. "If they can do this to me," she said, her voice steady, "they can do it to anyone. They've done it to people you'll never hear, people who don't have a mic, a vote, or a chance. But today, they're out of shadows to hide in." She paused, not for drama, but for weight, letting the truth settle like dust after an explosion. The room didn't applaud it, couldn't. The moment was too heavy, too raw. Ayanna Pressley stood now, her presence a quiet storm, her nod to Jasmine a vow that needed no words. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez remained by the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with the same fire that had carried her through her battles. Together, they were a wall, not of anger, but of resolve. A signal that this fight was bigger than one woman, one hearing, one USB. The chairman tapped his gavel, a soft sound that felt louder than it should have. "The committee will take a 5-minute recess," he said, his voice steady but strained. No one moved. Not Jordan, not his aides, not the reporters, not Jasmine. The room was locked in a moment that refused to end, a moment where the truth had finally claimed the floor. Outside, the chants grew louder. Not just Jasmine's name, but a call for change, for justice, for a reckoning that had been delayed. Too long, Maya Torres sent one final text to her editor. "She's rewriting history. Get me on air now." The screen behind Jasmine faded to black, but the light in the room didn't dim. It burned brighter, fiercer, because Jasmine Crockett hadn't just exposed a man, she'd exposed a machine. And the machine was creaking, cracking. Ready to fall, September 15th, 2025, 11:45 a.m., Washington, D.C., the House Ethics Committee hearing. Room was no longer a chamber of procedure, was a battlefield, scarred and smoldering, where the air itself seemed to pulse with the aftershock of Jasmine Crockett's revelations. The crowd outside the Capitol had swollen into a sea of voices. No longer just protesters, but a coalition of the unheard teachers, nurses, veterans, students, their signs a mosaic of demands for justice, their chants a rhythm that shook the marble walls like a heartbeat reborn. Inside the room was a frozen tableau, the silence so thick it felt like it could crack the polished mahogany table in two. The screen behind Jasmine glowed with the final slide from her second USB, a silver bullet smaller than a dime, but heavy enough to topple empires. A leaked memo detailing a network of corporate donors who'd funneled millions into campaigns. 2 gut healthcare reforms with Jim Jordan's name at the center. The words strategic influence, key congressional allies burned into the retinas of everyone in the room, from the stone-faced chairman to the reporters whose fingers hovered over keyboards, too stunned to type. Jasmine stood at the podium, her navy suit crisp, her posture unyielding, the silver ring in her Poquito relic from her mother, her silent tether to the past. Jordan sat across the room, his face ashen, his hands gripping the desk as if it were the last anchor keeping him from sinking. The cameras, relentless, captured every bead of sweat, every flicker of fear in his eyes. This wasn't a hearing anymore. It was a reckoning, and Jasmine Crockett was its architect. She stepped closer to the mic, her voice steady, not loud, but resonant, like a bell tolling across a silent valley. "This isn't just about one man," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. Pausing briefly on Jordan before locking onto the cameras, speaking directly to the millions watching live. "This is about a system that trades lives for dollars, that buries truth under checks and handshakes. And it's been killing people like my Uncle Vernon for years." She clicked her laptop, and the screen shifted to a new image, a grainy security camera still. Time-stamped 11:47 p.m., February 9th, 2023. Showing Jordan in a D.C. hotel lobby, shaking hands with a man in a tailored suit. Well, the man's face was clear. Richard Harlan, CEO of Horizon Pharma, a company that had lobbied against a bill to cap prescription drug prices, a bill Jordan had voted down 48 hours later. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that felt like the air being sucked out of a vacuum. Maya Torres, the CNN reporter in the press gallery, whispered to her cameraman, "That's the money shot. Don't lose it." Her notepad was a mess of scribbles, the word corruption circled in red. The internet was already ablaze. Hashtag Jordan Tapes, trending at 8 million mentions. Clips of Jasmine's speech looping across platforms with captions, like she brought receipts and the machine is breaking. Jasmine's voice cut through the murmurs, calm but unyielding. "This meeting wasn't on any public schedule," she said, pointing to the timestamp. "It wasn't disclosed in any campaign filing. But $100,000 from Horizon Pharma hit Congressman Jordan's super PAC the next morning. 12,000 patients, including my uncle, paid the price when that bill died. She paused, not for drama, but for weight, letting the number settle like a stone in the room's chest. The screen shifted again, showing a spreadsheet. Dates, dollar amounts, votes. All tied to Horizon Pharma and 3 other corporations. Each line was a transaction, a life bartered for influence. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was surgical, carving through years of denials and deflections. Jordan's aide, the lanky one who'd slipped out earlier, was back, his face pale, his phone now clutched like a grenade. He leaned toward another staffer and whispered, "He's done. We need to jump ship." The words were barely audible, but they carried a crack in the loyalty that had once shielded Jordan like armor. Across the room, Lauren Boebert stood, her voice sharp but unsteady, a last-ditch attempt to rally. "This is a political lynching," she barked, her hands slamming the table. "You can't just throw up grainy photos and call it evidence. This is a setup, a smear." Her words were meant to ignite, but they fizzled, met with hisses from the gallery and a stern glance from the chairman. "The gentlewoman will refrain from outbursts," he said, his gavel hovering, ready to strike. Boebert sat, her face flushed, her defiance crumbling under the weight of the room's judgment. Jasmine didn't acknowledge her. She clicked again, and the screen displayed a new documentan affidavit from a whistleblower, a former Horizon Pharma lobbyist named Daniel Weiss, who'd worked with Jordan's team for a decade. The affidavit was brutal in its clarity. I was instructed to coordinate payments to ensure favorable votes. Congressman Jordan was aware of every transaction. The room didn't just gasp, it recoiled. A Democratic aide dropped her pen, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. A Republican congressman from Ohio, one of Jordan's allies, shifted in his seat, eyes darting to the exits as if calculating a run. Jasmine's voice returned, low and deliberate, each word a hammer strike. "This isn't speculation," she said. "This is a paper trail, signed, dated, and verified. And it's not just about one vote, one company, one life. It's about a network that's been strangling our system for years, while people like my Uncle Vernon die waiting for care they were promised." She paused, her eyes locking on Jordan, not with anger, but with something colder pity. "You didn't just betray your oath, Congressman. You betrayed the people who trusted you to keep it." The words landed like a blade, clean and final. Jordan opened his mouth, but no sound came. His hands trembled, his pen slipping to the floor with a soft clink that felt louder than it should have. The cameras caught it all, the sweat, the silence. The unraveling of a man who'd once commanded rooms with a smirk. Outside, the crowd had grown into a movement, spilling across the Capitol lawn. Their signs now joined by banners from a group of veterans who'd driven overnight from Baltimore. Their leader, a grizzled man named Marcus Tate, held a sign reading for Vernon, for us all. Marcus had served with Vernon Crockett in Vietnam, had watched him come home broken, only to be broken again by a system that discarded him, all standing. Among the protesters, Marcus spoke into a live stream, his voice rough but steady. "Jasmine's fighting for my brother," he said, his eyes wet. "She's fighting for every one of us they forgot." The video hit 100,000 views in minutes, shared by thousands who'd never met Vernon but knew his story through Jasmine's words. Back inside, Jasmine clicked to another slide. This one, a timeline of healthcare cuts tied to corporate donations, each date a wound, each dollar a scar. "February 2023, she said, her pointer tapping the screen. $200,000 from a healthcare PAC to Jordan's campaign. In March 2023, a vote was held to defund VA hospital upgrades. That vote cost my uncle his life." She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. The room was no longer silent, it vibrated. A low hum of realization that this wasn't just a hearing, but a turning point. Ayanna Pressley stood now, her presence a quiet storm, her nod to Jasmine a vow that needed no words. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez remained by the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with the fire of someone who'd faced the same machine and lived to tell it. Together, they were a fortress, not of anger but of resolve, a signal that this fight was for every voice silenced, every life dismissed. The press gallery was chaos, reporters typing furiously, phones buzzing with notifications. Maya Torres sending a text to her editor. This is history. Clear the evening slot. Her cameraman adjusted his lens, capturing Jasmine's face, calm but unyielding, a beacon in the storm. The CNN feed shifted, its lower third now reading, Crockett's evidence rocks Congress, Jordan faces fallout. Twitter was a wildfire. Hashtag for Vernon trending alongside hashtag Jasmine Crockett, with 10 million mentions and climbing. A young law student from Dallas stitched a video of Jasmine's speech with her own story of being dismissed in a courtroom. Her caption, simple, "She's speaking for me." Jordan tried one last time, his voice hoarse, desperate, a man shouting into a void. This is entrapment. He stammered, his hands flailing, knocking over his water glass. The spill spread across his desk, a small but telling mess. You can't just dig up old emails and photos and call it proof. Where's the due process? Where's the fairness? His words were meant to rally, but they fell flat, drowned by the weight of the evidence. His colleagues didn't nod, didn't stand, didn't meet his eyes. Even Boebert, usually his loudest ally, stared at her hands, her bravado gone. A Republican senator from the Midwest leaned toward his aide and whispered, "Draft a statement. I'm not tied to him." The aide nodded, her fingers flying across her phone, the words distancing and urgent flashing on her screen. The room was fracturing, not along party lines, but along moral ones. And Jordan was on the wrong side. Jasmine clicked to a final slide, this one a bombshell even she'd hesitated to use. It was a video, not from a dinner or a lobby, but from a closed-door meeting of Jordan's campaign team, recorded by a disillusioned staffer who'd quit months earlier. The footage was grainy, the audio tinny, but the words were clear. Jordan's voice, unmistakable, filled the room. "We don't need to win the argument. We just need to win the narrative. Keep her loud, keep her angry, and the voters will tune her out." The video cut to another voice, a strategist named Paul Carter. "It's not about policy, it's about perception. Make her the villain, and we're golden." The room didn't gasp, this time Mitt froze. Every breath held, every eye locked on the screen. Even the chairman, usually stoic, leaned forward, his pen still, his face unreadable but heavy. Jordan's aide, the one who'd returned, stood again. This time bolting for the door, his phone dropped in his haste. A reporter from NPR followed, her recorder catching his muttered words. "I didn't sign up for this." Jasmine let the video play out, its final frame a freeze of Jordan laughing, his hand raised in a toast. She didn't speak, didn't need. 2. The silence was her weapon, sharper than any shout. When the screen went black, she stepped back, her hands folding calmly on the podium. "This wasn't about me," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "This was about every person who's been framed, silenced, erased. Every patient who died waiting for care. Every voter who trusted you to serve them, not sell them." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, landing on Jordan for a moment before moving to the cameras. "You built a machine to control us. Today, that machine breaks." The words weren't loud, but they were seismic, shaking the room, the Capitol, the country. The gallery erupted not in applause, but in a low, steady chant. "Jasmine, Jasmine." It wasn't worship, it was recognition. A collective acknowledgement that something irreversible had happened. Outside, the crowd had become a movement, no longer confined to the Capitol lawn, but spilling into the streets, blocking traffic as news vans doubled in number. Marcus Tate, the Vietnam veteran, was now joined by dozens of others. Their signs a wall of demands. Fix the VA. Justice for Vernon. No more lies. Marcus spoke into a megaphone, his voice rough but unyielding. She's not just fighting for her uncle, he said. She's fighting for every one of us who's been left behind. The live stream hit 500,000 views, shared by veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and ordinary citizens who'd seen Jasmine's face on their screens and felt something shift. In Dallas, a group of high school students gathered in a community center, watching the hearing on a projector, their teacher pausing to say, "This is what courage looks like." One student, a 16-year-old named Amara, posted a video on TikTok, her voice trembling. "Jasmine Crockett is who I want to be. Not loud, not angry, just true." The video went viral, hitting 2 million views in an hour. Asterisk, inside. The chairman tapped his gavel, his voice strained but firm. The committee will recess for 15 minutes, but no one moved. The room was locked in a moment that refused to end, a moment where the truth had claimed the floor and wouldn't let go. Jordan stood, his chair scraping the floor, his face a mask of defiance and defeat. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice barely audible, but the cameras caught it. And the internet turned it into a meme within minutes. Jordan says it's not over. But it is. His aides flanked him, their eyes low, their phones buzzing with calls they couldn't answer. Reporters followed, their mics extended like spears, but Jordan didn't speak. He walked down the hall, his steps heavy, his tie still crooked, a man retreating from a fight he'd already lost. Jasmine remained at the podium, her hands organizing her folder with the precision of a teacher closing a lesson. She didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't bask. She'd planned this for months, not for headlines, but for accountability. For Vernon, for the people who'd never get a mic. Ayanna Pressley approached, her hand resting briefly on Jasmine's shoulder, a nod that carried the weight of shared battles. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stayed by the wall, her presence a quiet vow that this fight would go on. The three women, together, were a force not loud, not flashy, but unshakable. A Capitol custodian, an older man with graying hair, paused as he swept the floor, his eyes meeting Jasmine's for a moment. "You did good, Congresswoman," he whispered, his voice thick with pride. She smiled, just slightly, and said, "Thank you, sir. Not just for me." The words were soft, but they carried a reminder that this was bigger than one room. One day, one woman. The recess didn't break the tension. Reporters scrambled, their phones lighting up with notifications from editors demanding live updates. Maya Torres was already on air, her voice steady but urgent. "This isn't just a hearing," she said, her face filling screens across the country. "This is a dismantling of a system that's been hiding in plain sight." Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose Jim Jordan. She exposed a machine that's been running Congress for decades. The CNN Chiron shifted. Crockett's evidence sparks. National outcry. MSNBC had dropped its panel to go full screen. Ben Crump back on air, his tie slightly askew, his voice fierce. "This is systemic corruption caught on tape," he said. Jasmine Crockett didn't just bring receipts, she brought a revolution. Fox News, usually quick to spin, was silent. Its feed stuck on raw footage of Jordan's retreat. No commentary, no defense. In the break room, away from the cameras, Jasmine sat with Ayanna Pressley. The chaos of the hearing replaced by the hum of a coffee machine and the faint chant of the crowd outside. Ayanna poured 2 cups, the congressional-grade coffee, bitter and burnt. But neither reached for sugar. Jasmine stared at the grimy window, the protesters' voices a distant echo. "I didn't win today," she said softly, her voice human, unguarded. "I just made sure they couldn't lie anymore." Anna nodded, her eyes carrying the weight of shared scars. "You held the line," she said. "Not just for you, for all of us." Jasmine's mind drifted, not to the hearing, but to a memory 7 years old. Standing outside a Dallas courthouse, her mother's hand tight around hers. A sign reading "Justice" now trembling in her small fingers. The air had been thick with humidity and anger. A black man shot, no charges, no trial. "Why are they yelling at us?" she'd asked. Her mother's answer had never left her, "Because truth makes cowards nervous, baby. So you keep holding." That sign. Today she'd held it again, not cardboard, but facts. Not a child, but a force. Back in the chamber, the recess ended, but the room felt different. The air thinner, as if the truth had burned away the pretense. Jordan returned, his face composed but his eyes hollow, a man walking through his funeral. His colleagues kept their distance, their chairs angled away, their notes untouched. A freshman Republican from Texas tapped his mic, then pulled back, his courage faltering. A senior senator from Missouri whispered to his aide, "Get me out of his orbit by tonight." The aide nodded, her fingers already drafting a statement. Jasmine took her seat, her folder closed, her work done. The chairman cleared his throat, his gavel tapping once, softly. "The hearing will resume," he said, but his voice carried a question, as if unsure what could follow a moment like this. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The evidence was a wall, towering and unbreakable. And the room was now a courtroom where the verdict was already written. Outside, the chants grew louder. Not just Jasmine's name, but a call for change, for justice, for a system that served people, not power. Amara, the Dallas student, posted another video. This one, a simple shot of her holding a sign. "Jasmine fights for us." It hit 5 million views. Shared by teachers, activists, veterans, and strangers who'd seen something in Jasmine's stand that felt like their own. The hearing room, once a stage for politics, was now a mirror, reflecting a nation that could no longer look away. Jasmine stood, her briefcase in hand, her steps steady as she walked toward the door. She didn't look at Jordan, didn't glance at the cameras. She paused at the threshold, her hand brushing the silver ring in her pocket, and whispered to herself, "For you, Mama. For you, Vernon." Then she stepped into the floodlights, into the crowd, into history. Not as a hero, but as a woman who'd held the truth and refused to let it go.